So that's when I discovered positive and negative music, and it was through the books of Corinne Heline that people don't know about, it seems, but she's amazing. She's where I got the idea for New Age music, because she talked about New Age music, and her New Age music were the great classical composers, César Franck, Wagner, Palestrina. The positive music was consonant, harmonious, uplifting, spiritual, love, and all just positive emotions and spiritual, which is beyond emotions.
Would you consider the album by Bobby Callender, Rainbow, would you consider that positive?
Oh, he was one of the positive guys. I haven't listened to that album in 50 years, so I can't really comment on it. I don't remember. I'll get into Bobby in a minute. And from Corinne Heline, I found that she had drawn out a scale applied to the Zodiac, the astrological Zodiac. And I found out that she'd gotten this from Max Heindel, who was a Rosicrucian astrologer guy, and had published this way that you apply the 12 notes of the scale to the 12 signs of the Zodiac. Well, that made complete sense to me. I mean, astrology was a part of, before the 17th century, the Age of Enlightenment, reason, science, and all that, where they threw out astrology, but it was a part of astronomy. And it's very, very ancient. And the fact that the scale of 7 notes is not something arbitrary at all, which the scale book that I wrote, I explain this because, and it's known, and this is a known fact, it's how this scale came about. There is something to 12. And then the divisions of the 12 into 5 and 7 and all this stuff. And then I added in there what I've learned from the great Russian teacher Gurdjieff and his Enneagram, and all these things were I was tossing around all the time and working with. And I applied this way that Max Heindel had gotten from somewhere, probably from old teachings, and I applied it to the Zodiac. And then I said, well, I knew a little bit about astrology. I knew, and I'm not talking about fortune telling or any of that. It just, I learned a little bit about what it was. I was curious. I was reading all these books about in the Samuel Weiser bookstore. I mean, it was just reading this stuff. In Samuel Weiser bookstore, he became a big publisher, but this bookstore had more knowledge in it than I was just unreal. Corinne Heline was really amazing and really introduced me to the idea of positive music. When I took this thing and applied it to the Zodiac, and I knew from astrology that if you connected any of these points on this 12 with a triangle, they considered those the positive. I don't know what the term is. It's called a triune, I think, or something. And so if you had anything that was connected with these triangles was positive, and the square was negative. I knew that. And these are called negative aspects and positive aspects, and then they get into a whole thing about what they do with astrology, which I never really learned, and I wasn't that interested in that. But when I did that, with the triangle, I came up with 2 major chords and 2 minor chords. When I drew the square, I came up with this other chord that I called a Duochord, and it's on the back of the Don album, even though they said there were some mistakes in the spelling there, but that's there in the notes on the back of the Don album. This chord is the root of negative music, and it's just, you can see it from these drawings, and you can hear it, and it's exactly what I was working toward with my studies with Morton Feldman. And it consists of 2 tritones, a half step apart, and those 2 discordant intervals that I mentioned. This, when you read the scale book and also the Cosmon that I wrote in 1970, when I talked about this is where I introduced to the world or whatever this concept of positive and negative music based on my own experience and my ears, the studying of positive with Gustave Aléat Barcan, the negative with composer Morton Feldman, two opposites over here with the screeching bomb music on the left, and over here on the right I've got this spiritual music. So I was experiencing it and then learning it intellectually all at the same time, and I realized this was a big deal, because the classical music of the 20th century, that was the big deal. Discords, the standard of classical music. When you went to schools, Juilliard was still pretty conventional, but in general you were being taught these methods of music where you would write discords. And if you listen to a lot of the contemporary classical music of the 20th century, it's either discordant, full of discords, or it's just completely discordant. And in my case, I took it all the way, trying to get as close to discordant as I could. More tritones and minor seconds than there were the consonant, the nice intervals that were the good, harmonious intervals. So I was already there, already doing that, and then all this understanding came, and so then I went and I told Morty, I said, you know what, I really appreciate everything I learned from you and all that, but I've come to realize, and I used the term, I said, this music's not natural. I didn't say any evil or anything, I just said it's not natural. And he said, well, I agree with you. And he said, but if you ever quote me, I'll deny I ever said it. And that's the last time I saw him. Weren't on good terms, but I just couldn't study that anymore. And then I went on a mission for positive music, because that's not the purpose of music, in my opinion. It's there, and it's part of art, and it's useful, and it's used in drama. So but it's just, I felt like what the world needed was not more the negative music, getting more and more negative. We needed to seek out what was positive and spiritually uplifting.
And you took it to both extremes with your debut album, which is beautiful. And you used a lot of natural sound with the crickets and thunder, and it's ingenious. I mean, that album is just mind-blowing. Now, before you did that, though, before you had a chance to really put your powers together in the West Coast, you recorded an awesome country psych album with Tom Parrott. Didn't you play sitar with Tom Parrott on his?
Played electric guitar on that album.
Okay, it was electric guitar. Yeah. Okay, it's been a year since I've listened to it, but I got both of his albums.
It could have a sitar on there. I don't know.
He had a few sitar moments.
Yeah, so the albums that I played in New York, it was Tom Parrott, and that was Folkways, Smithsonian, South Smithsonian.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a guitar solo on there, that's what led up to the Don album, actually. As far as sitar, my most interesting experience on the sitar, the one I like the most now, and I look back on it, was I was doing these gigs. Look, there was a lot of commercials at that time. They wanted Indian instruments on the commercials, because that was the year where that was the thing. And these were all national commercials I did for Lipton soup, but there was one where they had an onion soup dip, and the Indian lady would come and dip it in there, and then she'd go like this, and then they had a Mexican lady to come up, and she had or a guy or something, they had a sombrero, that kind of thing. And when the Indian lady was there, I was there doing something, maybe tambora, I don't know, tabla, I don't know what I was doing.
Camel cigarettes, Gillette razors?
Yeah, those are the ones I remember. And the Yellow Pages. The thing was, all the studio musicians had answering services. Used answering service. They just schedule you, because you didn't have cell phones or any of that. You're in the studios. So I got this, when I went home that night, I had this scheduling in the studio that I had never heard of. That I was to report to the 30th Street studio with sitar. And like I say, it was down in the lower part of Manhattan. I'd never, it was lower than where most of the studios were. I went into this building, and there's this great big waiting room. It was unusual. So I sat there in one of the couches there waiting, and I found out later that the 30th Street Studio was Columbia studio where Miles Davis' most famous jazz album ever, the Kind of Blue album, had been recorded in there, and Bob Dylan's album, all these amazing albums had been recorded in there, but I didn't know that at the time. So these great big doors flung open, and I went in there with my sitar, and here was a whole, orchestra in there, the harp and violins and cello, and here was this man, the conductor, turned out to be, what's his name, Sebesky. I have a thing about remembering names, but he's very famous. I had all his he'd written books on arranging, and I had all those. I didn't know who he was. Don Sebesky. And here was a guy sitting on a stool with a trumpet. Jack Sheldon. Okay, I didn't know. They didn't tell me who he was. He's a famous trumpet player. And he was on the Tonight Show and stuff. So at any rate, I didn't know who these people were. And I walk in and said, all eyes are on me, right? Here's the sitar player. And so I took my sitar out and he said, here's your score, your chart. Here's your chart. And I said, well, you don't read music with a sitar. It's an improvised deal, right? And you could just feel this thing go over. It was like, oh my, all paying all these people and all that. And they're ready to record the sitar, and here's the sitar playing saying you can't read it. And I said, don't worry. I said, I can see what you want here. You want these fills and all that. Well, I'll just improvise. So they started it all up, and the trumpet player started playing. I played along with them. Did one take and it was done.
What album did that go on?
The Warm Sound of Jack Sheldon. And I didn't know who that trumpet player. I'd heard his name and I'd forgotten it. It was just, the main thing about that was I went home and it was just like, oh my God, what was that? That was like unreal, right? And I pulled that one off. It's like, okay. So 4 or 5 years ago, I was with some composers in Nashville and arrangers. Jim Gray is a great arranger, and we were just all chatting it up, and he started talking about Jack Sheldon. He was friends with Jack Sheldon out in L.A. I said, that's him. And he said, what? I said, that's the guy, the trumpet player. I remember his name now. And so I went on the internet and I found I think I had to buy it from England, but I found this album and the song was Nature Boy, and I made a video, put some of my own pictures in there, and I put it out on YouTube, and it's been out there for quite a while. But that was a really interesting story right there.
That's cool. Now, where did Bobby Callender come into this? What time period?
Yes, Bobby. That was in 68, probably the first part.
It's a pity he's not somewhere else enjoying life.
I don't remember what I played on the album. I don't remember any of it. And I probably met him, I think Colin Walcott. If I go online and see the musicians, I'm not listed on the album.
On the back cover you are.
All right, okay, I don't have the album here. And what did it say I played on?
I thought it said sitar, but it could have been tabla, or it could have been both for different tracks. I don't remember, but if you go to Discogs and you look at the picture of the back cover, it'll show you exactly.
Oh, okay. So I made friends with Bobby right off, and he would come up to my apartment. It was in the Bronx at that time. We sat down at the piano and we worked together, and I don't know what I was doing. Was I helping him with songs, or I just don't remember. We were working on things together and we were friends. And I know I was on that album. But I had moved to the Bronx because my lease was up on the other place where we started out. The first year in New York was on Fifth Avenue. It was a really nice apartment. And so we found another one in the Bronx, and the people in this building were old Bronx people, you know, from way back, and they were New Yorkers through and through and all that. And Bobby would come up there to work with me, and he wore a robe.
Like a white robe?
Yeah, white robe. We wore it everywhere, right? And so one time he came up there, and then he went home, and then I think it was the next day, one of the neighbors, I think the upstairs neighbor, I saw him in the hall, and he said, "There was this guy yesterday. I think did he go to your apartment?" I said, "There's this black guy, and he had a robe on. It was like a white robe." And he was just perplexed, you know. And I said, "Well, it's Bobby Callender, right?"
Don't you bother me. You better find your soul. In and out you go, out or in, you never know.